Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, holistic health coach and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the exact location where optimal wellness lies. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, gut health, mental health, and more. I am so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. We are joined today by my now friend and fellow health coach, Carlee, and we're talking all about emotional eating and healing your toxic relationship with food, where our relationships with food are most impacted, whether it's in your immediate environment growing up or just culturally speaking, how we as Americans see food and what diet culture perpetuates in regards to that. Carlee specializes in emotional eating and weight management, so this topic was really on par in terms of what she works with clients on a daily basis. And it really resonated with me because I saw this a lot as a therapist, especially in my internship, where I got to work alongside a lot of therapists who were also eating disorder specialists. And so I had the opportunity to witness their work with clients who were struggling with eating disorders. But not only that, just in my experience as a therapist, seeing disordered eating, right? Which there's a difference there. Eating disorders, falling into the category of meeting a certain criteria versus disordered eating, which I think there's this subclinical disordered eating that exists within a lot of our population, just based on the fact that the way we see food is so distorted, it's so toxic and so forth. So Carlee and I get into that today. And then she also explores what it means to heal a relationship with food and steps to take in order to do that. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I think it's going to resonate. I think it's very relevant. I think it's a conversation that just continues to need to be had. And I look forward to your feedback and your thoughts, and I hope you enjoy. So thank you for being here as always, and let's welcome Carlee to the table, and let's eat. Hi, Carlee. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Of course. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so why don't we dive right in? Tell us about what brought you to coaching. Give us the backstory of maybe your personal health journey that led you here, just, the circumstances that inspired you to go into this field.
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of have a long story, but I will keep it as short as possible. But I have been through my own health and wellness journey from the youngest age from what I can remember. In middle school, just always started to struggle with my relationship with myself, my body, but I don't think I really understood where it was coming from. I just knew that I didn't feel like everyone else.
Sure.
And then I grew up seeing everyone do diets, right? My mom was on diets, my aunts were on diets, kind of just seeing those people around me try all these different diets. And I always struggled with my mental health as well. So
Mhm.
kind of just putting it all together, I didn't really know what was happening to me. I just knew that I kind of felt different,
Yeah.
um, but couldn't pinpoint what it was.
Okay.
And through kind of high school and college, it was just a constant cycle. I would go on a diet, lose weight, gain it back. And through this all, I was continuing to hate myself. I was still struggling with my anxiety and mental health. And I just kept falling into a deeper and deeper hole. And then obviously college, I had lost a lot of weight right before college, really not in a healthy way. And then I ended up gaining double, triple it back
Yeah.
in college because, the freshman 15 plus is what
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
like
It's a
to
real thing.
say.
Yeah.
And then throughout my whole college experience, it was kind of the same, just that cycling of dieting and binging and restriction. And then In college, I got into a relationship. It was a very toxic relationship, with someone that just didn't serve me and it totally had me like lose my self-worth.
Hmm.
It was really hard, but the second it ended and the second I got out of that horrible relationship, it like changed my world around, and it was hard and it was a long journey, but it brought me to what I'm doing today, because it showed me like, okay, wait, all these things are connected. I'm not confident in
Yeah.
myself. I just let myself go through this whole horrible experience this past year where I was treated really poorly. And I kind of just took a full year off of dating, off of like even interacting with a
Yeah.
lot of guys, and just focused on myself. And I realized like alcohol doesn't make me feel good. I realized that I was completely binge eating and had very disordered eating. I
Wow.
realized that I hated the gym. Like it was
Yeah.
just kind of all of these different things that I noticed about myself that
Sure.
I didn't notice before.
Yeah.
Um, so after I graduated, I had moved to New York City. I made new friends, which really helped. And I also invested in myself. I invested in everything, a therapist, a nutrition coach, a health coach, a life coach. Like I just did all the things, and it was the best thing that ever happened. And I was in marketing,
Okay.
totally different industry. And I realized through my own health journey that I wanted to help others,
Yeah.
which then led me to getting my certification as a nutrition health coach, and then my specializations in emotional eating, hormone health, and then a big specialization is also weight management, where I help people. So that's where when I started my practice, Clarify Wellness with Carlee. So that's kind of what brought me to where I am today. It's really my personal journey that led me to wanting to help others.
Yeah. Wow. That's that's really inspiring, and I think a lot of people can relate to that story. I certainly can when, you are kind of navigating what is considered or what you perceive as being a normal part of being, and I don't even want to just say female, just in general, of adolescence, of young adulthood, from the mental and the physical side of things, and then getting to a point when you have that almost aha moment or the awareness to realize, okay, number one, this is not working. Number two, I don't feel good. And number three, this can't keep going, right? There has to be a change. Something has to come to an end here. Otherwise, what type of life am I living? And it sounds like you removed yourself from that toxic relationship. And that was essentially when maybe you had that moment and you decided, okay, what am I doing for myself? I'm taking time off from maybe distractions is a good word for it, maybe. And you really put all that energy back into you. And now it was all meant to be, right? It was kind of like the darkness that now brought you into this light because now you're able to do the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's interesting because I always say like I wish I could hug the younger version of myself. But
Hmm.
at the same time, my husband always says to me, like, he has his own story, and we always say we have to you kind of have to hit rock bottom to
Yeah.
get to the top. And as horrible as that sounds, it's so true. And then my mom would always say to me, like, all the heartbreaks, all the times I'd be crying that I didn't want to go to a social event because of my body, or because they didn't have grilled chicken and vegetables, like I would
Yeah.
freak out over that stuff too. She would say to me, she's like, all of these heartbreaks and all of these struggles are getting to the right person or the right
Yeah.
career or the
Yeah.
right type of life that you should be
Yeah.
living.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I know that Emily, we've talked about this, but like I think a huge thing too is the mental health aspect of things, and how much it relates to what we eat and what we do and what we put into our bodies. And that was a
Sure.
huge recognition thing for me, is just recognizing like, wow, all these things I'm doing are impacting me.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, but you need to hit a bunch of road points and tough points in your life to get to where you are today.
Oh, yeah, it's fueling each other. So you were saying you were navigating anxiety and maybe poor mental health. And then, if you're crash dieting and binging, and I'm sure your level of education around nutrition was pretty minimum, or you were eating the foods that one might consider healthy at, 16, 17, 18, or whatever age it was, you can only imagine how that is then furthering the mental health concerns, right? Or the symptoms that you're experiencing in an emotional way being aggravated by poor nutrition and not taking care of your body. And you had said, you specialize in hormone health. So all of that interwoven into it. It's just a vicious cycle that too many of us are experiencing. And I'm grateful, that you're able to share on this now. And I'm sure you're grateful for your experience too, because like you said, and your mom says, this is leading you to where you're meant to be, but also you have a greater level of empathy for people who come to you looking for help, that you can say, yeah, like I get it. I've been there.
Mhm.
I hear you. I know what that's like. Now let's address it, because maybe you are the person that you didn't have at that age, you know?
100%. And it's so interesting because sometimes, like, I don't know, people close to me, they're like, are you sure you want to share all of that? And I'm like, I am an open book because I want people to feel less alone. And like,
Yeah.
I'm so open with my clients. I'm like, listen, I'm still learning too, right? Like, we're still learning as coaches. And I think that's something that social media tends to do the opposite of, is making
Mhm.
it seem like a highlight reel and like we
Yeah.
have everything together. And like,
Yeah.
I'm so honest. I'm like, listen, I still struggle with this. I'm working on it, but I'm going to work on it with you too. And I know
Yeah.
how it feels to be in your position. And I think that's what makes us good coaches,
Yeah.
and good helpers, because we've been through it and we know how it feels to feel the way our clients are feeling.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And it's this level of perfectionism, I think, that's promoted, that is problematic, because you're right. There's like a disconnection that's there. It's like I can't relate to you because you are seemingly this unattainable perfection of health or whatever the case is. And it's like, yeah, but that's not realistic, nor is it possible to be perfect in health by any way, by any means. And it makes you more relatable. It makes you more able to connect with people when you're like, yeah, I'm still there. I'm still learning this, or I have hard days, or I have this, or whatever the case is. And I think the humanness of it all is what's most important. At the end of the day, we're all humans. So that's
100%. Yes,
yeah,
we are.
yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your specialties. You mentioned them before, but I'm curious to know if you walk us through the three that you had mentioned, a little bit about the work that you do in each of those.
Yeah. So I have certifications and specializations in obviously nutrition because of nutrition health coaching, but then also emotional eating and hormone health. The weight management comes more from the nutrition and my personal background of helping clients and also myself. But I really do help people mainly with like relationship with food, emotional eating, and weight management. The hormone health, I don't help with as much, but it kind of comes intertwined, but I don't
Sure.
have like a specific program on hormone health just yet, because I think there's a lot of things that people are still learning, a lot of tests that have to be done with hormone health, but I add that into my program just to balance hormones a little bit, but I'm more specialized with the emotional eating, relationship with food, and weight management.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point where it is all very much interrelated.
Mhm.
So when you say emotional eating, let's
Mhm.
explore that a little bit more. What are you seeing in the populations that come to you as being primary drivers of emotional eating, or, the biggest issues that you're seeing within this field of work?
Mhm.
Just give us a little bit more background, because I know for me, coming from a mental health background and then the work that I do now, it's saturated with this issue. And
Mhm.
so, I would be very curious to hear kind of your point of view on it.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's talked about a lot, but not necessarily in the right way, because I think some people might think they're emotionally eating, but they're not. Or some people don't think they're emotionally eating and they are. I
Yeah,
don't think what people realize is emotional eating is a lot of different things. It could be overeating, or it could just be under eating, or it could be eating like normal, but not at the right times or not in the right state of mind. And it's interesting because I even had a client yesterday say to me, I don't emotional eat. And then 10 minutes later, she was telling me that she had a really bad day at work and didn't eat all day. And I think that's something that is just a really big disconnect that people don't realize. And I think when it comes to emotional eating, like, this is disordered eating.
sure.
And there's also that whole thing, the difference between eating disorder and disordered eating, which is why I always say disordered eating when it comes to emotional eating, because a lot has to stem around your mental health. And there we go, bringing it in again. I think the biggest thing with emotional eating is what people don't realize is you have to get to the root cause.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't see that because they're just trying to stop themselves like from eating something specific. So I've even had people come to me and they're like, "Oh, like I stopped eating the cookies and I started eating carrots instead." And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, but you're still soothing yourself by
With food.
eating, and we
Yeah.
don't want to do that."
Yeah.
And listen, food is comfort. Like I can relate to that. That is a known fact. Like food gives us comfort. It does. And that's okay. But when it comes to you eating a full bag of chips or you eating when you're not hungry, I think it's really important for us to think like, okay, why is this happening? Is this helping me? Is this serving me? Right? So for example, if you're not eating, that's going to make your emotions worse. It's going to make you
Mm-hmm.
anxious. You're going to be shaky. It's not going to nourish your body. If
Hmm.
you're overeating, most people do emotionally eat with more sugary and comfort foods.
Sure.
And those also, they're going to serve you for like 3 minutes max, right?
Yeah.
You eat the cookie. Oh, that brought me so much happiness. And then you're also feeling the guilt from the cookie. And it's just
Yeah.
a ending cycle. So
Sure.
I think something really important is what people don't realize is in order to stop emotional eating, it's really a big lifestyle change, but it's also healing your relationship with food, which is
Sure.
why I bring emotional eating and healing relationship with food hand in hand. Because usually, if someone's emotional eating, they have to heal the relationship with food
Sure.
and themselves in life.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective on looking at the root cause because I come across that a lot as a coach. And, you know, another example alongside the one you mentioned about the carrots is, swapping out the cookies for something that's maybe more healthful, like a more healthful choice, right? And while that temporarily might keep you away from the refined sugar and whatnot. It's just replacing it one for the other. And then even further, I have this come up quite frequently where, it's this, I can't even have it in the house because if I have it in the house, it's like a level of safety that they don't feel. And that to me is really problematic as well. And I don't know if you could speak on this, but clients who say to me, if I have it in the house, I'm just going to eat the whole box, right? And it's really important for us to call attention to that as coaches because if you're feeling like you have a if you are not safe around a box of cookies, right? There's something going on there underneath the surface that's drawing you to it, which I would qualify as being another form of emotional eating, right? If you're feeling like that is something that can't even exist in your house without feeling like you have this pull towards it, the temptation's too strong for whatever reason, then I think that's something to call out and to be addressed. So I'm wondering your thoughts. Do you feel like that falls in the same realm? What kind of experience have you had with that?
Yeah, definitely does. The amount of times where, and I have so many examples, but a food actually that gets brought up a lot, weirdly enough, is peanut butter. I mean, come on, peanut butter's
Mm,
great.
yeah,
Um, but it's for some reason, I think it's just a comfort food for a lot of people. And I
sure.
think in the past, I think, you go on diets or you've been on social media and there's a lot of noise around peanut butter
Yeah,
saying it's bad.
yeah.
Um, and I think for some reason, a lot of people, because they have this idea that it's a bad food when it's not, like disclaimer, it's one of actually the best fats that you can have. Um, People think that they can't have it in the house. And that's just an example of one food because that's something that a food that comes up a lot with clients. They're like they start with me and they're like, okay, and I'm giving them a list of foods that are going to nourish themselves. And they're like, oh, peanut butter, I can't have that in the house. I'm like, no, you're going to go to the grocery store and you're going to go get a jar of peanut butter. I tell them what peanut butter is the best version for them, what's going to make them feel good, what's not going to have them like hopefully have cravings. But it's also, you need to keep that in your house because, like you said, like if a good way to put it is say that they don't have peanut butter in the house. They're going through an emotional time. They go to their friend's house and they have peanut butter. The peanut butter sitting out. Their friend goes to the bathroom. They're eating the peanut butter out of the jar. And this is based out of a true story. Like I hear it all the time. So if that food is not in your house, it's gonna be in your
Mm,
life in
hmm.
some other
Hmm.
way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, for me, when I was going through a lot of my struggles, it was cereal. I don't know why. I think maybe because that was something I grew up eating a lot of.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I found that like I wouldn't allow myself to have it in the house, but then I would be at an event or something and or at a friend's house and there would be cereal and I would be eating way more than I had to
Sure.
because you don't know how to control yourselves around that type of
That's
food.
food.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely, I think that's a huge thing. In fact, I kind of break up my program and the way I work with clients in different ways because I think when it comes to emotional eating, like we disconnect the two things and we work on the emotions, but then we also work on healing your relationship with food with that peanut butter. And I will make them or try and have them if they want it. I then have them like try it each day, but just teach them how can we make this more fulfilling rather than eating the whole jar. Why are you eating the whole jar? And really figuring out why is this a trigger food for you
Mm-hmm.
slash a comfort food? Because
Mm-hmm.
usually comfort foods are also trigger foods, which is a whole nother topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's, really interesting when you mentioned, kind of like, well, I can't have it in the house. So if I'm not allowed to have it in the house, any access I do have to it, I have to take advantage of it. And I
Mhm.
think it goes back to like this primitive nature in us. Like the more you tell someone you can't have something or you have to restrict yourself from it, the more you're going to want it.
Mhm.
So it's like you're kind of reverse psychology to some extent. It's like, no, you want to have it in the house so we can work on this and we can exercise this because, it's an important spotlight that needs to be brought to that specific food because just because it's out of the house doesn't suddenly mean that you're now, cured, for lack of a better word, from that root issue that's there as to, okay, why is peanut butter something that you can't openly have available and feel comfortable around and not, overindulge in? And I don't think a lot of people look at it that way, you know?
Yeah, no, they don't. And we're dealing with so many different things here. And that's why, like, people ask, and I know we'll go into this, but like, people say, oh, like, why is your program 6 months? Like, 6 months is a really long time. And I'm like, there are so many, and I offer 3 month as well, but there's so many things that we have to dive deep into that I don't think people realize when starting. It's like you are going to figure out so many different things about yourself that you never realize. And
Hmm.
our minds are shaped we can hear what like I know for me one time I went on a diet and bananas weren't allowed, right? This was in like middle school or high school, something stupid. And I don't think I ate bananas for like 6 months straight. I eat bananas all the time now.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm here. I'm living, I'm healthy. Like I think we get one and I'm not on video, but like in quotations, bad foods, and that's why we need to stop labeling foods as good or bad. That's a whole nother thing too. But there's just a lot of different categories, I guess, that we can break into to help get to a point where you can live without emotional eating and with having a healthier relationship with food.
Sure. Yeah. I couldn't agree with that more. I think it's a really important point. And I love that you brought up the good and bad conversation because that is something I think that's just really embedded in our culture. And especially nowadays, the trends and you know, the information that's out there around what's good and what's bad and how confusing it can be. I think if we were to look at it, from a nutritional standpoint, we can agree that there's certain foods that are more healthful and certain foods that are lesser healthful. But when it comes to this morality that we're placing around it, that's tough. So I'm wondering, how do you go about working with clients in dismantling these labels?
Mhm.
Because it's, I think it's just, like I said, indoctrinated in how we see food collectively as a population, and that's not something that's easy to address.
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing is working on language. And it's the same thing as like when you're talking about yourself, right? And you're saying negative things about yourself. So I always say, this is like one of my favorite things. I'm like, you're only allowed to call it bad if it tastes bad. Like I'll have a client be like, oh, I ate so bad this weekend. I had a cupcake. And I'm like, did the cupcake taste bad? Because if
Yeah.
it tasted bad, you're allowed to call it bad. But if it tasted good, you're not allowed to call that bad. Like
Yeah.
you enjoyed it. So
Yeah.
the first thing is just like really trying, and this is hard. It's much easier
Yes.
said than done,
Yeah.
but taking away the comments and how you're talking to food. And I always like to kind of approach it as like think about food as a human.
Yeah.
Think about food like, would you talk about a friend like that? Or would you talk, and it's the same thing when like negative self-talk, right? Like, would you speak to a friend like that?
Sure.
Probably not. And obviously it's different type of speaking, but I think disconnecting labeling foods as good or bad is one of the first steps in healing relationship with food. But sometimes it's one of the hardest things to do because, I'm 28. I've been calling foods good and bad for so many years.
Sure.
So like it took me a while to get to the point. And it's crazy because once you get to a point, and I've had clients say this to me, once you get to a point, you realize how many people around you say things.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's another huge thing. And I know that food noise is another thing that's talked about right now, but it, food noise can also be hearing other people talk about food in a certain way. Because then, like, if someone is around you and they ate the piece of pizza and they're like, oh, that was so bad, then you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I failed my relationship with food. But wait, was that bad? Like, you can go in circles. So,
Sure.
disconnecting those labels of food is one of the best things you can do to start healing your relationship with food.
Yeah, I love that. That's like
Yeah. Yeah.
neutralizing food. And I agree with you. I
Yeah.
think, I know for me, my radar is so much more attuned to the language that people are using. And I too, with clients, I'm very cognizant, even if it's like in the midst of conversation, they're talking, I'll blatantly interrupt them and be like, no, no, what was that? Say
Yeah.
that again? What was that? Say that word,
Yeah.
like, oh, I know you don't like that. It's like, no, let's talk about this because
Yeah.
yes, number one, yes, I don't like it. But number two, it's important for us to reflect on what is this saying about how you feel about yourself in relation to choosing those foods. And that's what's so problematic. And I think that's what is so harmful. And like you said, one of the first steps in healing any relationship with food is using that opportunity to neutralize it, because you can still feel that one food is lesser helpful versus the other, because inherently that is true. But
Yes.
it's not about one being good or one being bad, and what that can do for someone's mindset and uh someone's diet, and so forth. It's just really harmful. So as far
Yeah.
as healing your relationship with food, what do the steps look like thereafter?
Yeah, and I wanted to just quickly touch on what you just said because
Mhm.
that is something that's very important in my practice because I do help people with weight. And so I say, like, yeah, we're not calling foods good or bad, but I think you just like mentioned this, but in different wording. But like, there are foods that are more nourishing than other foods. And I am very honest about that. Like, yes, I am going to tell my client to make a yogurt bowl instead of just eating cereal and milk, right? I'm going to help them learn how to build a plate and how to learn how to eat in terms of satisfying themselves. So I'm very honest with that. It's just taking away the good or bad and making it more like, okay, how is this going to nourish my body in the best way possible? Or we'll use the cupcake for the example. How can we add this to a plate to make it fulfill my blood sugar more, my body more, and nourish myself and my body and mind more?
Sure.
So I just wanted to quickly add that
Yeah,
in
yeah,
because
I
that
love
is
that.
important. In terms of healing relationship with food, I am really big on journaling. I'm very big on tracking how you feel around certain foods because what people don't realize is there's a lot of times where foods make you feel a certain way, but you're not even realizing it. And you're
Sure.
only going for certain foods during a different time in your life or like, and it can just get very specific. I think the
Mm.
other thing is, again, enjoying foods in moderation. I'm not telling you to go eat a pint of ice cream.
Yeah.
I'm telling you to have the ice cream and pair it with something else. Learn how to eat it where it's going to satisfy you
Sure.
really well. If you're ever in a point in life where you feel like food is something you're constantly thinking about, that's not healthy. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying you can't think about your next meal, right? Like I get excited about what I'm going to make for dinner or what I'm going to have for breakfast the next morning. That's okay. But if you're on a meeting or if you are like hanging out with a friend and all you're thinking about is your next meal, that most likely means that your relationship with food isn't great. So
Yeah.
it's really like honing into your emotions and why you're feeling this way about a certain food. And also allowing yourself to eat those fear foods because that's the only way you're gonna heal and you're gonna figure out why these things are triggering for you and your body.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of awareness building, which is not something that we are taught. And I love that you say that, certain foods making someone feel a certain way and not realizing that that's the case. And I mean, that goes either way, right? Where it's like I could eat food that's maybe ultra inflammatory and I have symptoms thereafter versus I'm eating foods that are fueling and I actually feel stable. I actually feel, clear-minded. I actually feel good. I feel energized. And I
Mhm.
think both directions we're not taught to connect that piece with our emotions. We're not taught to tap into that physical experience that we're having when we eat food. Food is just food, and that's just what people have, which is true, right? Food is just food, but the connection that it has in relation to how we feel is just something that we're lacking in understanding. And I think that, like you're saying, can be really transformational to start to understand what is fueling and what is maybe not so much.
Yeah, definitely. And then with that I forgot to add is that emotional eating aspect and figuring out like what other things can I do, right? There's the aspect of healing relationship with food and allowing yourself to eat that food, but then there's also the aspect of healing yourself and healing the emotions aspect. So like when I do journaling, I have them journal around food to see how they're feeling around certain foods, how it made them feel, all of that, but I'm also having them figure out, I call it an emotional eating toolkit. Like it's really to figure out how can they handle their emotions. List 3 friends you can call. Have a post-it note in front of your computer or on your phone of like specific things that you can do, whether it's painting or knitting. I have so many clients that come to me and they like fall in love with hobbies that they were doing when they were 10 years old. And it's such an incredible thing because they're like, wow, I forgot how much that soothes me and how much that
Yeah.
helps me. So it's figuring out like, why is this happening and how can I help it without involving food? So those two parts are actually really separate, which is really like incredible for a lot of clients to see.
Yeah, I love that. Like the coping piece of things and directing their attention to something that's more productive and more helpful. Because, like you said in the beginning, and this is something I talk about often. And then I think I mentioned to you, I interned at an eating disorder focused private practice when I was in mental health. So this was something I saw all the time. But mostly now as a coach, it's this illusion that the food is bringing you comfort. Now, when it progresses to being an eating disorder, I think that enters a territory that is just a lot more extreme and needs to be addressed appropriately. But when it comes to our side of things, when we're working with clients and a client has the impression that something is going to bring them comfort or it's going to help the situation, you have the cupcake for the example, and
Mhm.
you think it's bringing you that comfort, and then the cupcake is gone and you're still left with the stress, the anxiety, the anger, the whatever it is that's there, right? And so, and like you said before, there's guilt maybe or shame, and that just fuels the fire because, oh, well, now I already did this, so I might as well have a second one, or what, that's the list goes on in terms of next steps there. And so, what I'm hearing from you is it's more about discovering what are ways for me to manage with this emotion that I'm experiencing by first understanding what emotion is there and then meeting that emotion with something that's going to help me more healthfully maybe diffuse or to manage, so that I'm not reaching for something that's just going to perpetuate the cycle.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's really crazy. And that's why you need to get a handle on the cycle now because it
Yeah.
does take time to heal and to figure it out. And you're gonna find things along the way that you never thought you would find. Um, so yeah, it's crazy, but it's true. There's a lot to figure out there.
Yeah. So what would you say causes us to have toxic relationships with food? What do you think are driving factors that influence this?
Yeah, I would say the main factors that I have seen with clients is how they grew up, what kind of household they grew up in, what kind of food they were eating, how their parents ate, how their siblings ate, how their grandparents ate. Um, if you're growing up in a household where carbs are not good for you, you're going to learn that throughout your whole childhood until you really learn that they're actually great for you, that our body needs a lot of them. So I would say how you grew up. I would say the stress around you. So that can be from relationships to jobs to finances, to moving your body. Like, how is that affecting it? The people you're around. So if you're having people around you that have disordered eating, it's going to impact you. You're constantly hearing people talk about their bodies or losing weight or doing this. And then I
Yeah.
would say the last thing is definitely the false information around us. I think social media has consumed this world, and yes, some positives, but lately really negative. And I think it can be really difficult because you're getting information from people that like don't even have certifications, don't even have degrees in this stuff. And you hear that oats do this to you, and then you see the whole world not eating oats
Hmm.
when oats can be
Hmm.
really beneficial for some people. So that's another really random example, but definitely like the false information around us, how you grew up, the stress and the people around us, I think are definitely the main um things that impact those toxic relationships with food.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly when it comes to environment. And I think the hardest one of them all, now, social media, especially as it continues to kind of permeate our culture so much more, especially with younger generations and whatnot, how much more relevant it is than when it maybe was when we were younger. Definitely much different. But when it comes to environment and growing up, what I find to be really interesting is we are the product of the environment that we were raised in, So if we see our parents or role models or older siblings or whatever the case is, if we see them behaving a certain way around food or choosing food or using language the way that they use their language around food, it's really challenging to bring someone's attention to the fact that this is abnormal, right? Or this is unhealthy because that's my normal and that's your normal. And
Yeah.
we all have different normals. And so that's really hard because I think it does bring you to a space of challenging, okay, well, this is what has worked for me over the course of 15 years, 20 years, however long. And now I'm being forced to kind of reconcile with it and realizing maybe it wasn't necessarily healthy or normal or productive for me to look at food in this way. And yet it was kind of our upbringing, right? It was just the way that we were taught, and not in a maladaptive way, not
Mhm.
like it was malintent behind it, where, your parents or whomever was like, oh, we want you to have a toxic relationship with
Yeah.
food.
No, but it was just their
Right.
world too.
Right.
It's
And I think it's a generational thing. And
oh,
I hear this a
100%.
lot, whether it's clients who are maybe in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, or even the way my mom talks about food or way other people
Mhm.
I hear talk about food, it's so generational too. So
Mhm.
that has to be considered in the midst of it too. Luckily, I think we're in a better space.
Yeah.
We are seeing, improvements in that arena, but I definitely think, in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, like the language that was used and the way people saw food, just based on the research, now things have changed. It's just night and day, you know?
Yeah, and I always ask clients like before getting started, I always ask them like, how did you grow up? Like, what
Yeah.
was your life like? How did your parents eat? How did you eat as a kid? Because a lot of it has to do with that. And then it's also like that's for the younger clients, but then for my older clients, right? For the ones that are 50 or 60 years old, I ask them, I'm like, listen, like, are you willing to make these changes? Because a lot of them are stuck in their own ways. And
Yeah.
I have like had to, sorry, it's thundering. I don't know
Oh,
if
that's okay.
you
Yeah.
hear me. But I've had to like stop people and be like, listen, like I can't work with you if you're not willing to make these changes because they are stuck in their own ways. And listen, love my mom so, so much. She is my best friend, but like she has been on diets
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
okay. But that is how they grew up and that's
Yeah.
how their generation was. So that's what I always learned.
Yeah.
And right, this is my profession, but still sometimes she'll like be like, I'm starting Monday. I'm like, no, 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 we're gonna change the wording, right? Like she's a client basically because
Yeah.
I'm constantly trying, but they are the hardest clients because
Yes.
they are so
Yeah.
stuck in their ways. And it's sad because you want to help as much as you can,
Yeah.
but that's why I want to get ahead of it now for the people
Yeah.
our age and a little younger because I think with social media, even more, there's a negative impact around it. So just
Yeah.
to have it be talked about more is very, very important. But yeah, the way we grow up is huge.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that because it's so funny. One of my best friends and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago, and she said the same thing about her mom. She's like, I try so hard to help my mom understand, and it's just really challenging.
Yeah.
And that's not their fault. It's just a matter of their conditioning. If they've seen food the way they've seen food for decades,
Hmm.
it's really challenging to step outside of that, and
Yeah.
so like what you're saying, you're luckily, you know, intervening with younger
Yeah.
populations to hopefully help this kind of cycle discontinue because
Mhm.
all that's happening is it's just being passed down and passed down.
Yeah, and
So,
they know that it's wrong. Like I've talked to so many of my mom's friends and like it breaks my heart honestly because these are like adults who like they want to have healthier relationships
yeah,
with food, but they're even more stuck in their ways and it's like very hard for them to not do the things that they once thought were okay.
right.
And I think that's a huge thing too. Like it's just they're a little harder to get into because they've had even more years of learning this
Yeah,
information. So it is like it's just it makes me want to do more of what I do and help more people. But yeah,
yeah,
intervening is important, but to an extent, unless they
yeah.
want help. But it's always important to say like, hey, have you ever like reevaluated your relationship with food? Because I think this could really actually help you with your weight loss. That's a thing too.
Yeah. 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 And I think to that point too, I would argue that a large percentage of these people who aren't able to change or don't want to look at it aren't having much success in what they're doing. You know what I mean? Because you and I both know that those approaches are ineffective, are not sustainable, and are really problematic in a number of ways, but can also have a big impact obviously what we know on mental health in relation to their relationship with food, but also on our physical health, right? If we're cutting
Yeah.
our calories, if we're over exercising, and all of these modalities that I think are traditional when it comes to female health in terms of weight loss and these are just very outdated and hormonally, we know, like, and I'm sure you know, obviously, that it's not super great for the sake of our hormone health. And usually we either don't lose any weight or we just gain weight as a result of those behaviors. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting because it's not effective.
No, no. And I think it's also just because you mentioned that, I think it's also looking at the other factors. Like I've had
Mhm.
clients come to me and they're like, oh, like I need to do this, but I don't want to gain weight, right? And or the opposite. And I'll say to them, like, listen, we're not just looking at weight here. We're looking at energy, we're looking at sleep, we're looking at focus, we're looking at mental health, we're looking at like everything because your body is a whole body. It's not just
Right.
the weight that's on you. It's so many different things. So that's a really like big piece of the way I work because a lot of people will come to me for both things to heal a relationship with food, but also to lose weight. And a lot of people say it's not possible, but it is possible. You just need to heal your relationship with food before you
Before,
focus on the weight loss
yeah,
stuff. And what people don't realize too is sometimes to lose weight, you actually have to eat more.
yeah.
And that's a huge thing too. But again, it's all custom, but that's just another thing that I wanted to mention because I think that's important for people to know because some people will be like, I don't want to gain weight, but I want to heal my relationship with food. And then they keep going years and years and it
Mhm.
just gets worse and worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of, like you said, perpetuating a damaged relationship with food.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a very delicate, fine line,
Mhm.
gray area to some extent where it's
Yeah.
like you have to really navigate it pretty gracefully and pretty cautiously because there's a lot that needs to be considered there,
Yeah.
and really understanding someone's history and working with them at a pace that feels good to them is where they're going to see the best results. But I think, we want all of it all at once.
Yeah. I know. I know.
Yeah.
But it is possible. It just takes time. It's patience is key. It's all I say to my clients. Like you got to be patient, you got to be consistent and it
Mhm.
got to work and
Yeah.
it'll all come.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, Carlee, this has been so great. I think the work that you're doing is so important and so needed because, like I said, I think this is such a prominent issue, and I think it's keeping a lot of people, in a really toxic space and preventing them from feeling good, from feeling comfortable around food. I mean, food is there's so much to food, right?
Mhm.
And while it can be very emotionally charged, it's also, it's part of our culture, it's part of
Yeah.
us, celebrating with others. I mean, there's so much to it. And so really healing that area of your life and as a result of that area of your health, I think is so, so important, and it's necessary in a wellness journey, obviously, to address these issues. And so I appreciate you coming on here to talk about this and exploring it a little bit more and sharing about the work that you do. I'd love for you to share with everyone where they can find you, how they connect with you, how they can connect with you, where they can work with you, some of the details around that.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for letting me share. I think it's so important that just people know that it's possible to heal.
Sure.
So I always love kind of just sharing my story and how I work with people. People can find me a few different ways. The first would definitely be Instagram. It's just at Clarify Wellness. They then can go to my website on that page, which I think is the best way to get in contact with me. Um, and I offer a few different things. I have my Clarify and Nourish program, which is my 3-month and my 6-month program. That's where we can really dive into the emotional eating, the weight management, all of that fun stuff that we just talked about. And then I also offer a pantry clean out. So really helping you figure out like what products are going to make you feel good, what products are going to make your family feel good. But then again, also allowing yourself to have your favorite foods in there as well and kind of finding that balance. So those are my 3 main offers. And I also always offer a free 15-minute consultation to make sure that it's the right fit as well. But people can DM me any questions they have on Instagram also.
Okay, great. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us and, sharing with us a little bit more about what you do. I appreciate you for that. And thank you to everyone who is tuning in today. I appreciate you as well. And until next time, be well.